Here's a truth that might sting a little, but you need to hear it. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is bending over backwards trying to be liked by people who barely think about them. Someone is refreshing their phone, hoping for a reply that will make them feel worthy. Someone is saying yes to something they desperately want to say no to, just because they are terrified of being rejected. And honestly, that someone might be you. It has certainly been me. Look around and you will notice something interesting. Most people spend their lives chasing attention. They chase approval from friends, validation from strangers, recognition from coworkers, and affection from people who barely value them. They constantly seek reassurance that they are enough, hoping someone else will confirm their worth. Yet the more they chase, the less valuable they appear. Value works differently. The most respected people in the world rarely beg for attention. They do not desperately try to convince others of their importance. They do not exhaust themselves seeking acceptance from every room they enter. Instead, they understand a powerful principle. What is valuable does not need to chase. It attracts. Now let me be clear about something before we go any further. This is not about becoming arrogant, selfish, or emotionally distant. Not even close. This is about understanding your worth and refusing to give it away for free. Being expensive is not about money, luxury, or status symbols. It is a mindset. It is the ability to recognize your value, protect your energy, and establish standards that prevent others from treating you as an option. Throughout this journey together, you will discover why approval-seeking weakens your influence, why boundaries actually increase respect, why desperation repels the very opportunities you want, and why self-respect is the true foundation of personal power. You will learn how to stop seeking validation from the outside world and start building real, unshakable confidence from within. And here is the truth that ties it all together. It is simple, but it is life-changing. The world often treats you according to the value you communicate. If you constantly sacrifice your standards for acceptance, people will assume your value is low. But when you carry yourself with confidence, discipline, and genuine self-respect, others naturally respond differently. Not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. The goal of this journey is to help you become someone who no longer needs to chase attention, approval, or recognition. Instead, you will learn how to become the kind of person whose presence, character, and standards speak louder than words ever could. So, if you have ever felt overlooked, undervalued, or taken for granted, this is for you. If you have ever stayed too long in situations that drained you, this is for you. If you have ever wondered why some people seem to naturally command respect while others struggle for it, you are about to understand why. It is time to stop selling yourself cheap and start living like you know your worth. Chapter 1. Stop selling yourself cheap. One of the most damaging mistakes people make in life is selling themselves cheap. And the painful part? They do it every single day, often without even realizing it. They lower their standards to gain acceptance. They tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict. They give away their time, energy, and attention to people who do not appreciate them. Then they sit there wondering why they feel undervalued, overlooked, and completely exhausted. Here's something I want you to really sit with. People often teach others how to treat them. Every decision you make sends a message about your perceived worth. When you constantly sacrifice your needs to please others, you communicate that your priorities are less important. When you accept poor treatment without objection, you signal that disrespect is acceptable. When you chase approval at all costs, you tell the world that your value depends on someone else's opinion. High-value people understand a different principle. They know that self-worth begins with self-respect. Before anyone else can recognize your value, you must recognize it yourself. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine walking into a store and seeing two watches. One costs $20 and the other costs $10,000. Most people will immediately assume that the expensive watch is more valuable, even before examining it closely. Why? Because value is often communicated before it is proven. The same principle applies to people. Now, this does not mean pretending to be superior or acting entitled. It means carrying yourself with standards that reflect your worth. People pay attention to how you present yourself, how you spend your time, what behavior you tolerate, and what boundaries you enforce. These factors shape how others perceive you, whether you realize it or not. Many people live with an unconscious fear of rejection. Because of this fear, they become people pleasers. They say yes when they want to say no. They agree when they disagree. They remain silent when they should speak up. They believe that constant accommodation will earn them love, respect, or acceptance. Unfortunately, the opposite often happens. When people see that you are willing to abandon your own needs to satisfy theirs, they may begin to expect it. What started as kindness becomes obligation. What started as generosity becomes exploitation. Over time, resentment grows because you feel unseen and unappreciated. And I want to be gentle with you here because this is important. Being kind is valuable. Being helpful is admirable. But there is a real difference between generosity and self-sacrifice. One comes from strength. The other comes from fear. People who know their worth help others because they choose to, not because they are afraid of being disliked. They understand that true confidence allows them to say no without guilt. They recognize that every yes to something unimportant is a no to something that truly matters. So think about the areas of your life where you feel drained right now. Chances are there is a lack of boundaries involved. Perhaps you allow certain people to consume your energy. Perhaps you constantly prioritize other people's needs while neglecting your own goals. Perhaps you tolerate situations that no longer deserve a place in your life. Every time you accept less than you deserve, you reinforce a belief that your standards do not matter. Eventually, that belief becomes part of your identity. But here is the good news. Identity can change. The first step is becoming aware of where you are undervaluing yourself. Pay attention to the moments when you seek approval at your own expense. Notice when you stay silent to avoid discomfort. Observe when you overextend yourself for people who would never do the same for you. Awareness creates choice. And once you recognize these patterns, you can begin replacing them with healthier ones. Start by setting small boundaries, protect your time, respect your commitments, honor your priorities. Learn to decline requests that do not align with your values. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may resist the change. That is completely normal. Remember, Not everyone will like the new version of you. Some people preferred the version that was easier to control. But growth often requires disappointing those who benefited from your limitations. As your standards rise, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop seeking validation from everyone around you. You become more selective about where you invest your energy. You develop greater confidence because your actions finally align with your values. The most valuable people are not those who demand respect. They are the ones who demonstrate self-respect consistently. Their behavior communicates that their time matters, their goals matter, and their well-being matters. When you stop selling yourself cheap, you stop treating your life as a discount product. You begin to recognize that your attention, energy, and presence are valuable resources. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to them. This is the foundation of becoming expensive. It starts with a simple but powerful decision, refusing to trade your self-respect for approval. The moment you make that choice, you begin changing how you see yourself and how the world sees you. Chapter 2. Break your addiction to approval. Let me ask you something honest. How many decisions have you made today, not because you truly wanted to, but because you were worried about what someone else would think? If the answer is more than 0, you are not alone. One of the greatest obstacles to becoming a high-value person is the addiction to approval. It is a habit so common that many people never even realize they have it. They shape their decisions around what others might think. They change their opinions to fit in. They avoid risks because they fear criticism. They spend years trying to earn acceptance from people whose opinions should never have mattered in the first place. At its core, approval seeking is the belief that your worth depends on external validation. It is the idea that you are only valuable if other people recognize your value. And the problem with that? When your confidence depends on outside approval, your emotional state becomes controlled by forces you cannot control. Think about how that actually plays out. One compliment makes you feel worthy. One criticism makes you question everything. One rejection feels devastating. One moment of being ignored feels like proof that you are not enough. This is a dangerous way to live because it places your self-worth in the hands of strangers, co-workers, friends, family members, and even people who barely know you. Instead of becoming the author of your own value, you become a prisoner of other people's opinions. Now, I want to be fair here. The desire for approval is natural. Human beings are social creatures. Throughout history, belonging to a group increased the chances of survival. Being accepted meant safety. Being rejected could mean isolation. Because of this, our brains are wired to care about what others think. But there is a difference between appreciating acceptance and depending on it. High-value people enjoy respect when they receive it, but they do not require it to function. Their confidence comes from their principles, actions, and character, rather than the reactions of others. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a person who constantly checks social media to see how many people like their post. Their mood rises when the numbers are high and drops when the numbers are low. Their emotional state is completely tied to external feedback. They have unknowingly handed control of their happiness to other people. Now imagine someone who shares their thoughts because they genuinely believe in them. Whether they receive praise or criticism, they remain grounded because their sense of worth was never dependent on the response. That person possesses a form of freedom that many people spend their entire lives searching for. Approval addiction often shows up in subtle ways you might not expect. It appears when you hesitate to express your true opinion because you fear disagreement. It appears when you over-explain your decisions to gain understanding. It appears when you constantly seek reassurance before taking action. And here is one that hits deep. Many people delay their dreams because they are waiting for permission. They want everyone around them to agree before they move forward. They want certainty that they will be accepted before they take a risk. But the problem is that meaningful growth rarely comes with universal approval. Every successful person has faced criticism. Every leader has disappointed someone. Every individual who chose an unconventional path encountered people who doubted them. If they had waited for everyone's approval, they would never have achieved anything significant. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is realizing that disagreement is not rejection. Someone can disagree with your choices and still respect you. Someone can criticize your ideas and still value you as a person. The fear of disapproval often exaggerates the consequences far beyond reality. The truth is, no matter what you do, someone will approve and someone will disapprove. You can spend your life trying to satisfy everyone and still fail. Or you can focus on living according to your values and accept that not everyone will understand your journey. Breaking your addiction to approval begins with self-awareness. Notice how often your decisions are influenced by the desire to be liked. Pay attention to moments when you seek validation before trusting your own judgment. Ask yourself honestly, am I acting from conviction or from fear? The next step is learning to validate yourself. And I want to be clear, this does not mean becoming arrogant or ignoring feedback. It means developing an internal source of confidence. When you keep promises to yourself, you build trust in yourself. When you act according to your values, you strengthen your identity. When you pursue goals that matter to you regardless of outside opinions, you create genuine self-respect. The most confident people in the world are not those who receive the most approval. They are the ones who need it the least. As you become less dependent on validation, something remarkable happens. You stop performing for an audience. You stop editing your personality to gain acceptance. You stop measuring your value by how others respond to you. Instead, you begin living authentically. You become more decisive because you trust yourself. You become more resilient because criticism no longer destroys your confidence. You become more magnetic because people are naturally drawn to individuals who are secure in who they are. Remember this, approval is pleasant, but it is not power. True power comes from knowing who you are even when approval is completely absent. The moment you stop needing everyone to validate your worth is the moment you begin to discover your real value. High-value people do not chase approval because they understand a simple truth. When you know your worth, you no longer need strangers to tell you what it is. Chapter 3. Raise your standards relentlessly. Here's something that might change the way you think about your entire life. Every result you're experiencing right now, every single one, is connected to a standard you have either consciously or unconsciously accepted. the quality of your relationships, the condition of your health, the strength of your finances, the respect you receive from others, even the level of happiness you experience daily. All of these are influenced by the standards you tolerate. Most people spend their lives focusing on goals. They set targets, create plans, and dream about a better future. And goals are wonderful, but goals alone rarely create lasting transformation. Standards do. Let me explain the difference because this is important. A goal is something you want to achieve. A standard is something you refuse to fall below. That distinction changes everything. Imagine two people who both want to become financially successful. One person has a goal of earning more money. The other person has a standard of constantly improving their skills, managing their finances wisely, and refusing to settle for mediocrity. Over time, the second person is far more likely to succeed. Why? Because their daily behavior is guided by standards rather than occasional bursts of motivation. High-value people understand this principle deeply. They do not merely wish for better outcomes. They create standards that make those outcomes almost inevitable. And here's where it gets personal. One of the reasons many people feel undervalued is because they accept treatment that conflicts with their true worth. They tolerate disrespectful behavior. They remain in one-sided relationships. They allow others to waste their time. They compromise their values to avoid uncomfortable conversations. Every time this happens, a silent message is sent, both to the world and to themselves. That message says, this is acceptable. The problem is that whatever you tolerate tends to continue. People rarely rise above the standards they consistently accept. If you allow others to treat you poorly, they often will. If you constantly neglect your own goals, your potential remains unrealized. If you repeatedly lower your expectations, you gradually lower your confidence right along with them. Raising your standards begins with understanding something fundamental. Your life reflects what you permit. Think about the people you genuinely admire. Chances are they possess strong standards in certain areas of life. They have standards for how they work, standards for how they treat others, standards for how they spend their time, standards for the type of behavior they allow into their lives. These standards create consistency. Consistency creates trust, and trust creates confidence. One of the most powerful standards you can develop is learning to say no. I know many people struggle with this because they fear disappointing others. They believe that being agreeable will make them more likable. And while kindness is absolutely important, constant agreement often comes at a hidden cost. Every unnecessary yes steals time from something more important. When you say yes to commitments that do not align with your priorities, you are saying no to your goals. When you say yes to toxic behavior, you are saying no to your peace of mind. When you say yes to distractions, you are saying no to your growth. High-value people understand that saying no is not selfish. It is strategic. They know that every resource in life is limited. Time is limited. Energy is limited. Attention is limited. And because these resources are valuable, they protect them carefully. This does not mean becoming cold or inaccessible. It means becoming intentional. It means recognizing that your life deserves thoughtful choices rather than automatic responses. Another important standard involves your relationship with yourself. Many people demand more from others than they demand from themselves. They expect respect, honesty, and commitment from the people around them, while neglecting those same qualities in their own lives. True self-worth requires alignment. If you expect respect, respect yourself enough to keep your promises. If you value discipline, practice it consistently. If you seek excellence, commit to improvement even when nobody is watching. The standards you hold for yourself become the foundation of your identity. Now, I will be honest with you. At first, raising your standards may feel uncomfortable. You may lose certain relationships. You may face resistance from people who preferred the older version of you. You may encounter criticism from those who misunderstand your growth. Do not mistake discomfort for failure. Growth often requires leaving behind familiar patterns. It requires choosing long-term self-respect over short-term approval. It requires accepting that not everyone will support your evolution. The people who truly care about you will eventually respect your boundaries. Those who only benefited from your lack of boundaries may not. And that distinction tells you everything you need to know. As your standards rise, your confidence begins to rise with them. You stop accepting excuses from yourself. You stop settling for environments that drain your energy. You become more selective about who has access to your time and attention. Most importantly, you begin sending yourself a powerful message every single day. I matter. That message changes the way you carry yourself. It changes the way you make decisions. It changes the way others respond to you. Remember, becoming expensive is not about acting superior. It is about recognizing that your life has value. High-value people are not respected because they demand special treatment. They are respected because they consistently uphold standards that reflect their worth. When you raise your standards relentlessly, you stop living by default and start living by design. You stop accepting whatever comes your way and start choosing what aligns with your values. And in that moment, you take another important step toward becoming the kind of person who never has to beg for attention, because their standards already command respect. Chapter 4. Protect your time like a luxury asset. Let me tell you something that most people never fully grasp until it is too late. Time is the one resource every human being shares equally. We all get the same 24 hours. No more, no less. Yet most people treat their time as if it has little value. They spend it without intention, give it away without hesitation, and waste it without awareness. Then they wonder why their life does not reflect the success, respect, or fulfillment they desire. High-value people think differently. They understand that time is not just something you have. It is something you invest. And like any investment, it determines the quality of your return. When you protect your time, you are literally protecting your life. One of the clearest signs of low self-worth is uncontrolled access to your time. When anyone can interrupt your focus, when every request becomes an obligation, and when your schedule is dictated by other people's convenience, you are signaling that your time is not valuable. High-value individuals do not operate this way. They treat their time like a luxury asset, something rare, something intentional, something that must be respected before it is accessed. And think about what luxury actually means for a moment. Luxury is not about excess. It is about exclusivity. The reason certain things are considered valuable is not just because of their quality, but because of their scarcity and control. The same principle applies to your attention and energy. When your time is freely available to everyone, it loses meaning. When it is structured, protected, and directed toward meaningful goals, it gains power. Many people live in a constant state of distraction. Notifications interrupt their thoughts. Random requests break their focus. Unplanned conversations consume their energy. Social obligations override personal priorities. Over time, this creates a life that feels busy but not productive, active but not meaningful. And I want you to really hear this. Busyness is not the same as progress, not even close. Protecting your time begins with awareness. You must first recognize where your time is actually going. Most people underestimate how much energy is lost to small interruptions, unnecessary conversations, and commitments that do not align with their goals. Once you see this clearly, you can begin making real changes. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to pause before you say yes. Every request for your time should be treated as a decision, not a reflex. Instead of immediately agreeing, ask yourself, does this align with my priorities? Does it add value to my life? Does it deserve access to my energy? Not every opportunity deserves your attention. Not every conversation deserves your participation. Not every invitation deserves your presence. High-value people understand this deeply. They do not say yes out of guilt. They do not overcommit to prove their worth. They do not sacrifice their priorities to avoid disappointing others. Instead, they understand a simple truth. Every yes has a cost. When you say yes to something unimportant, you are indirectly saying no to something important. You are trading focus for distraction, purpose for obligation, growth for convenience. This is why boundaries are essential. And I want to reframe something for you here. Boundaries are not walls that isolate you from the world. They are filters that protect your energy. They define what gets access to you and what does not. Without boundaries, your time becomes fragmented. With boundaries, your time becomes powerful. At first, setting boundaries may feel uncomfortable. You may worry about how others will react. You may fear being seen as difficult or distant. But over time, something important happens. The people who genuinely respect you begin to respect your boundaries. And the people who only benefited from your lack of boundaries begin to fall away. This is not loss, my friend. This is alignment. Another key aspect of protecting your time is learning to eliminate unnecessary urgency. Not everything is urgent. Not everything requires an immediate response. Many people live in a reactive state, constantly responding to whatever demands attention in the moment. High-value individuals operate differently. They respond with intention rather than reaction. They prioritize what matters most instead of what appears loudest. This creates clarity, and clarity creates power. When your time is protected, your mind becomes calmer. When your mind is calmer, your decisions become better. When your decisions improve, your life naturally begins to improve. It is a beautiful chain reaction that starts with one simple choice, deciding that your time matters. You will also begin to notice something else. People start valuing your time more when you value it yourself. When you are always available, your time is taken for granted. When you become selective, your presence becomes more meaningful. Scarcity increases perceived value, and I want to be clear. This is not manipulation. It is alignment. It is simply how human perception works. What is easily available is often undervalued. What is thoughtfully given is appreciated more deeply. Protecting your time also means protecting your attention. In a world filled with constant noise, attention has become one of the most valuable forms of currency. Whatever has your attention is shaping your thoughts. Whatever shapes your thoughts shapes your actions. And whatever shapes your actions shapes your life. This is why high-value people are intentional about where they focus. They do not allow random distractions to dictate their mindset. They do not consume everything that demands attention. They choose carefully what deserves their mental space. As you begin to protect your time, you will notice a shift in your identity. You stop being someone who is constantly available and start becoming someone who is intentionally present. You stop reacting to life and start designing it. This shift is subtle but incredibly powerful. It changes how you see yourself and how others see you. You are no longer the person who fills gaps in other people's schedules. You become the person who has their own direction, their own priorities, and their own structure, and that is where true value begins to form. Because when you protect your time like a luxury asset, you send a clear message to the world and to yourself. My life is not available for waste, and my attention is not free. Chapter 5. Invest in yourself before anyone else. One of the clearest differences between high-value people and those who struggle with self-worth is where they choose to invest their time, energy, and resources. And this difference is not small. It is everything. Most people spend their best effort trying to gain approval from others, improve relationships that do not grow them, or meet expectations that were never aligned with their own goals. They pour themselves into everyone and everything else, and then wonder why they feel empty at the end of the day. High-value people take a different approach. They invest in themselves first. And before you misunderstand this, self-investment is not selfish. It is strategic, because everything you give to the world is filtered through who you are. Your skills, mindset, health, discipline, and emotional strength determine the quality of opportunities you attract and the respect you receive. When you invest in yourself, you are not just improving your life. You are increasing your value in every environment you enter. Many people make the mistake of believing that value comes from external validation. They think that if enough people like them, approve of them, or choose them, then they must be valuable. But this is a fragile foundation because it depends entirely on factors outside of their control. True value begins internally. It is built through consistent self-improvement. Think about how any asset increases in value. It is not random. It is developed, maintained, and improved over time. A skill becomes valuable through practice. A body becomes strong through training. A mind becomes powerful through learning and discipline. Nothing becomes valuable by accident. Yet many people expect personal transformation without investment. They want confidence without experience, success without skill, respect without growth. And this is exactly where frustration begins. High-value people understand that they must first become what they expect to receive. Now, investing in yourself takes many forms. And I want you to see how broad this really is. It can be learning a new skill that increases your career opportunities. It can be improving your physical health through exercise and nutrition. It can be developing emotional intelligence so you respond to life with clarity instead of reaction. It can be reading, practicing, building, or creating something that expands your capabilities. Every single form of self-investment sends a message to yourself. I am worth the effort. That message is more powerful than you might realize because it slowly rewires your identity. When you consistently show up for yourself, you begin to trust yourself more. When you trust yourself more, your confidence becomes natural rather than forced. And when confidence becomes natural, other people begin to respond differently to you, not because you ask them to, but because they can feel it. There is a reason why skilled individuals are often respected even before they speak much. Competence creates presence. When you are capable, people sense it. You do not need to prove your value through words. Your ability communicates it for you. On the other hand, when you neglect self-investment, you often find yourself overcompensating. You may seek attention, exaggerate your importance, or depend heavily on external approval to feel worthy. But none of these create lasting respect. Only genuine growth does. One of the most important areas of self-investment is discipline. And I say this with warmth because I know discipline is not always easy. But discipline is what transforms potential into reality. Without it, even the best intentions remain unfulfilled. With it, even small efforts accumulate into meaningful results over time. Many people misunderstand discipline as restriction. In reality, discipline is freedom. It removes chaos. It creates structure. It ensures that your actions are aligned with your goals rather than your impulses. When you discipline your habits, you stop reacting to life and start directing it. Another essential area of investment is your mindset. The way you think shapes the way you behave, and the way you behave shapes the life you experience. If your mindset is limited, your actions will be limited. If your mindset is expansive, your possibilities expand with it. High-value people continuously upgrade how they think. They challenge their assumptions. They learn from failure. They adapt when necessary. They do not remain stuck in outdated versions of themselves. They evolve. Health is another form of self-investment that is often overlooked, and it breaks my heart to see it happen. Your physical condition affects your energy, focus, and confidence. When you take care of your body, you increase your capacity to perform in every area of life. When you neglect it, everything becomes harder than it needs to be. Investing in yourself also means protecting your mental space. What you consume influences how you think. The information you absorb, the conversations you engage in, and the environments you expose yourself to, all of these shape your internal state. High-value individuals are selective about what enters their mind because they understand that clarity is power. Over time, self-investment creates a compounding effect. Small improvements in skills, habits, and mindset accumulate into major transformations. You do not become high value overnight. You become it through consistent action over time. And here is the most important part. When you invest in yourself, you no longer rely on others to define your worth. You create it. You stop waiting for someone to recognize your potential because you are actively building it. You stop hoping for better opportunities because you are becoming someone who naturally attracts them. You stop chasing validation because your growth speaks for itself. This is what it truly means to be expensive, not dependent, not uncertain, not searching for external approval, but built from within, strengthened by discipline, and expanded through continuous self-investment. When you invest in yourself before anyone else, you send a clear signal to the world. I am not waiting to become valuable. I am already in the process of becoming more. Chapter 6. Eliminate desperation from your life. I want to share something with you that might be uncomfortable to hear, but it could change the way you move through life forever. Desperation is one of the fastest ways to reduce your perceived value. It changes the way you speak, the way you behave, and the way people respond to you. When someone is desperate for approval, attention, love, or opportunity, it becomes visible, even without words. People sense it through tone, through energy, and through behavior. And once it is sensed, value automatically drops. You have probably seen it happen. Maybe you have even felt it yourself. That moment when you wanted something so badly that you could feel your energy shifting, becoming smaller, more anxious, more willing to accept less than you deserved. High-value individuals understand a simple truth. Desperation repels, while calm certainty attracts. Desperation often comes from scarcity thinking. It is the belief that opportunities are rare, that people are hard to find, or that success is limited to a few chosen individuals. When someone believes they are running out of options, they begin to cling. They cling to relationships that are not healthy. They cling to opportunities that are not aligned. They cling to attention that is not genuine. And in doing so, they lose their sense of power. The opposite mindset is abundance. And this is where everything begins to shift. Abundance is the understanding that life is full of possibilities, that one rejection is not the end, that one missed opportunity does not define your future, that the right people, opportunities, and outcomes are not something you chase, but something you align with through growth and patience. When you operate from abundance, your behavior changes in ways you might not expect. You no longer rush decisions out of fear. You no longer overextend yourself to be accepted. You no longer try to force outcomes that are not meant for you. Instead, you move with clarity and patience. And that changes everything. One of the clearest signs of desperation is overattachment. When someone becomes too attached to a person, outcome, or situation, they begin to lose emotional balance. Their happiness depends entirely on whether they receive what they want. This creates instability. High-value people detach their identity from outcomes. They can want something deeply without needing it to feel whole. And I want you to really understand this distinction because it is powerful. Wanting is healthy. Needing is dangerous. When you need something too much, you give it power over you. Another form of desperation shows up in communication, and this one is more common than people realize. People may overtext, overexplain, or overjustify themselves in an attempt to be understood or accepted. They may respond immediately to every message, agree too quickly to requests, or constantly seek reassurance in conversations. This behavior does not create respect. It creates imbalance. Confidence communicates itself through restraint. And I do not mean playing games. Not at all. I mean speaking and acting from a place of grounded certainty. When you are comfortable with yourself, you do not feel the need to constantly prove your worth. Eliminating desperation requires something that sounds simple but takes real courage: emotional independence. Emotional independence means your internal state is not controlled by external validation or rejection. It means you can experience disappointment without collapse and success without arrogance. When your emotional state is stable, your presence becomes stronger. One of the most effective ways to eliminate desperation is to slow down your reactions. Instead of immediately responding to every situation, create space. That space allows clarity to develop, and clarity reduces impulsive behavior driven by fear. High-value people do not rush to fill silence. They are comfortable with it. They do not rush decisions. They evaluate. They do not rush relationships. They observe. This patience is often misinterpreted as disinterest, but in reality, it is self-control. Another important shift is learning to walk away when necessary. And I know this one is hard. Desperation keeps people stuck in situations that no longer serve them. It convinces them that leaving means loss. But in reality, staying in the wrong place is the real loss. Walking away is not rejection of opportunity. It is protection of self-worth. When you are willing to leave what does not align with you, you automatically raise your value because now your presence is not guaranteed. It must be earned through respect, alignment, and mutual value. This does not mean becoming cold or detached from emotions. It means becoming grounded. You can care deeply without losing yourself. You can connect with people without abandoning your standards. You can pursue goals without being controlled by fear. Eliminating desperation also means redefining success internally. If your happiness depends entirely on external outcomes, you will always be vulnerable to instability. But if your satisfaction comes from your effort, your growth, and your integrity, then external events become less controlling. You begin to measure success by alignment, not approval. As desperation decreases, something powerful begins to emerge. Calm confidence. This is not loud confidence. It is not forced confidence. It is quiet, steady, and self-contained. It does not need to announce itself because it is already felt. People are naturally drawn to this kind of energy, not because it seeks attention, but because it does not need it. When you eliminate desperation, you stop chasing life and start attracting it. You stop trying to convince others of your value and start embodying it. You stop fearing loss and start trusting your path. And in that state, your actions become cleaner. Your decisions become stronger. Your presence becomes more powerful because high-value people are not defined by what they chase. They are defined by what they refuse to chase out of desperation. Chapter 7. Master the Art of Emotional Control. Let me ask you something that might surprise you. What do you think separates the people who command genuine respect from those who constantly struggle for it? It is not money. It is not appearance. It is not even intelligence. It is emotional control. Emotional control is one of the strongest indicators of personal power. It determines how you respond to pressure, how you handle rejection, how you deal with criticism, and how you navigate conflict. Without emotional control, even intelligent and talented individuals can lose their influence in a single moment. With it, even simple actions carry weight and authority. Most people underestimate how much their emotions shape their reality. When emotions are unstable, decisions become reactive instead of intentional. A small comment can ruin an entire day. A minor setback can create panic. A moment of rejection can feel like complete personal failure. This emotional instability often leads to behavior that lowers perceived value. And the worst part is, you may not even realize it is happening. High-value people understand that emotions are not meant to control them. Emotions are meant to be understood, managed, and directed. And I want to be very clear about something here. The goal is not to eliminate emotions. That is impossible and unhealthy. The goal is to develop awareness and control so that emotions support your decisions instead of dominating them. One of the most important aspects of emotional control is the ability to pause before reacting. Think about this honestly. Most regret in life comes from impulsive reactions. Saying something in anger, making a decision in frustration, chasing validation in insecurity. These reactions often create consequences that could have been entirely avoided with just a moment of reflection. The pause is powerful because it creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, you regain control. You stop being driven by instinct alone and begin responding with intention. High-value individuals use this space consistently. They do not rush into emotional responses. They observe first, they process, then they act. Another essential part of emotional control is learning to handle rejection without internal collapse. Rejection is a natural part of life. It appears in relationships, careers, opportunities, and personal goals. Yet many people interpret rejection as a reflection of their worth, instead of what it usually is, a simple mismatch or redirection. When rejection is taken personally, it creates insecurity. That insecurity then leads to overcompensation, approval seeking, or withdrawal. None of these responses increase your value. Emotionally strong individuals interpret rejection differently. They see it as information, not identity. It simply means that something was not aligned, not that they are unworthy. This shift in perception is critical for long-term confidence, and I genuinely believe it is one of the most important mindset changes you can ever make. Criticism is another area where emotional control is tested daily. Many people either become defensive or overly affected when criticized. They either argue to protect their ego or internalize the criticism as absolute truth without evaluation. High-value people do neither. They listen. They evaluate. They decide what is useful. They understand that not all criticism is accurate and not all feedback is relevant. They filter input based on logic, not emotion. This ability to remain neutral allows them to grow without losing confidence. And that is a rare and beautiful combination. Emotional control also involves detaching your self-worth from temporary outcomes. Life is unpredictable. And I think you already know this from experience. You will experience success and failure, acceptance and rejection, progress and setbacks. If your emotional state depends entirely on outcomes, you will constantly be unstable. Instead, high-value individuals anchor their identity in effort, integrity, and consistency. They focus on what they can control, not what they cannot. This creates emotional stability, even in the most uncertain situations. Another key aspect is managing emotional attachment. When people become overly attached to specific outcomes or individuals, they lose perspective. Their thinking becomes biased. Their behavior becomes needy. Their decisions become reactive. Emotional control requires the ability to care without clinging, to engage without dependence, to value without losing yourself. This balance creates strength, both in relationships and in decision-making. Silence is also a powerful tool in emotional control, and one that most people overlook. Many people feel the need to immediately respond to everything, justify themselves, or explain their emotions in detail. But high-value individuals understand that silence is not weakness. It is composure. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Sometimes clarity comes from waiting rather than reacting. And sometimes the strength it takes to stay quiet is far greater than the strength it takes to speak. As emotional control improves, your presence naturally changes. You become more grounded. You become less reactive to external opinions. You become more deliberate in your communication. People begin to trust your stability because they sense that you are not easily shaken. This trust increases respect, not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it through consistency. Emotional control also improves decision-making. When emotions are intense, thinking becomes narrow. When emotions are stable, thinking becomes clear. You begin to see long-term consequences instead of short-term impulses. You make choices that align with your goals rather than your temporary feelings. This is where real personal power develops. It is important to understand that emotional control is not suppression. Suppression leads to internal tension. Control leads to awareness and direction. You acknowledge what you feel, but you choose how to respond. That distinction changes everything over time. Mastering emotional control creates a new identity. You stop being someone who is easily disturbed by external events. You become someone who remains steady regardless of circumstances. You stop reacting to every emotional trigger and start responding from clarity. And when you reach that level of control, something shifts inside you. You are no longer influenced by every external opinion or situation. Instead, you influence your own state first. Because high-value people are not controlled by their emotions. They understand emotions, direct them, and use them as fuel for intelligent action, rather than impulsive reaction. Chapter 8. Speak less and increase your influence. Here is something that might go against everything you have been taught. Talking more does not make you more powerful. In fact, it often does the opposite. One of the most misunderstood aspects of influence is the belief that the loudest voice in the room wins. In reality, the opposite is almost always true. The more you speak without intention, the more you dilute your impact. High-value individuals understand that influence is not measured by volume. It is measured by weight. And weight comes from precision, timing, and restraint. Most people speak to fill silence, not to add value. They explain too much. They repeat themselves. They share opinions without thinking about their impact. Over time, this creates noise instead of authority. When everything you say is available in excess, nothing you say stands out. High-value people operate differently. They understand that words are currency, and like any valuable currency, they must be spent wisely. Now let me be clear. Speaking less is not about being silent or distant. It is about being intentional. It is about understanding that every word you say either increases or decreases your influence. When you choose your words carefully, people begin to listen more closely because they know you do not waste speech. Silence is often uncomfortable for those who lack confidence. They feel pressure to fill gaps in conversation even when there is nothing meaningful to add. But silence, when used correctly, creates presence. It signals control, confidence, and awareness. It allows others to think, reflect, and even project value onto you. And here is something fascinating about human psychology. When you are constantly talking, you remove mystery. When there is no mystery, there is no curiosity. And without curiosity, influence weakens. High-value individuals understand the power of being slightly unreadable, not confusing, but measured. They do not reveal everything about themselves immediately. They allow others to observe, interpret, and gradually understand who they are. This creates depth in perception. Think about the people who naturally command attention in a room. They are rarely the ones speaking the most. Instead, they are the ones whose words carry real weight when they do speak. People listen, not because they are forced to, but because the speaker has established credibility through restraint. This is because influence is not built in a single moment of speech. It is built through consistency of behavior and the quality of communication over time. Another important aspect of speaking less is avoiding unnecessary explanation. And I say this with compassion, because I know many of us do this without realizing it. Many people feel the need to justify their decisions constantly. They over-explain their choices to gain approval or avoid judgment. But excessive explanation often signals uncertainty rather than confidence. High-value individuals do not feel the need to justify every action. They make decisions based on clarity and stand by them without over-defending themselves. This does not mean ignoring others or refusing dialogue. It means communicating with certainty rather than insecurity. When you are confident in your decisions, you do not need to convince everyone. You simply express and then allow space for others to understand. Listening is another powerful tool that enhances influence. And honestly, it might be the most underrated skill in the world. Most people listen only to respond. High-value individuals listen to understand. This distinction changes everything. When you truly listen, people feel heard, understood, and respected. This builds trust quickly and naturally. Listening also provides information. The more you understand others, the better you can communicate with them. Influence is not just about speaking well. It is about understanding deeply. When people feel understood, they are far more likely to value your perspective. Strategic silence is also a form of communication. When you do not react immediately, when you pause before responding, or when you choose not to engage in unnecessary conversations, you signal control. You show that your attention is not easily triggered. This increases your perceived value. In contrast, people who constantly react, over-explain, or fill every silence often appear emotionally driven rather than grounded. Their presence feels scattered instead of centered. High-value individuals bring calmness into interactions. They do not rush conversations. They do not force opinions. They allow dialogue to unfold naturally and respond only when it truly matters. This creates a sense of authority without effort. Another key element of speaking less is avoiding gossip, negativity, and meaningless discussions. And this one is more important than most people think. The way you speak about others reflects your internal state. People who constantly engage in negativity often reduce their own perceived value without even realizing it. High-value individuals choose conversations that are meaningful, constructive, or purposeful. They do not waste energy on unnecessary drama or validation-seeking discussions. Over time, this discipline shapes how others perceive them. People begin to associate them with clarity, stability, and depth. Speaking less also improves your decision-making. When you talk less, you think more. When you think more, your decisions become more precise. When your decisions become more precise, your results improve. This creates a cycle of increasing influence and effectiveness. It is important to understand that speaking less does not mean suppressing your voice. It means refining it. It means ensuring that when you do speak, your words carry intention, clarity, and value. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the person who speaks with purpose naturally stands out. As you develop this habit, you will notice a shift in how people respond to you. They will begin to listen more attentively. They will value your opinions more. They will interrupt you less, not because you demanded respect, but because you earned it through restraint. Influence is not about dominating conversations. It is about being someone whose words matter when they are spoken. And that is why high-value people understand a simple truth. The less you say without purpose, the more powerful your voice becomes when it matters most. Chapter 9. Build a life that doesn't need validation. Most people spend their lives building identities that depend on other people's approval, and they do not even realize they are doing it. They choose careers that look impressive rather than meaningful. They pursue goals that sound successful rather than fulfilling. They shape their lifestyle around what will be admired instead of what will bring them genuine peace. And then, after achieving certain milestones, they still feel empty or uncertain about who they are. If that has ever been you, I want you to know something. There is nothing wrong with you. You simply built your life on the wrong foundation. And the beautiful thing is, foundations can be rebuilt. High-value living begins when you stop building a life for validation and start building a life for alignment. Validation-based living is fragile, and here is why. It depends on constant external reinforcement. If people praise you, you feel confident. If they ignore you, you feel invisible. If they criticize you, you feel uncertain. Your emotional stability becomes completely dependent on forces you cannot control. This creates a constant need to perform, impress, and prove yourself. And that is an exhausting way to live. But when you build a life that does not depend on validation, something powerful changes. You become internally anchored. Your decisions are no longer driven by how they will be perceived, but by whether they are aligned with your values, goals, and identity. This is the foundation of true personal power. And let me be clear, building a life without validation does not mean rejecting people or becoming isolated. It means freeing yourself from the need to constantly be approved. It means choosing direction over popularity. It means prioritizing meaning over attention. One of the first steps in this transformation is defining your own values clearly. And this is where most people get stuck, because most people never actually take the time to decide what truly matters to them. Instead, they absorb expectations from society, family, friends, and media. They inherit a life blueprint rather than consciously designing one. High-value individuals reverse this process. They ask themselves what kind of life they actually want to live, not what kind of life will impress others. They identify what they value in terms of peace, growth, contribution, relationships, and personal fulfillment. Once your values are clear, your decisions become simpler. You no longer need to constantly ask for opinions or reassurance. You already have an internal framework guiding your choices. Another key aspect of building a validation-free life is learning to detach from comparison. And I know this is easier said than done, especially in a world where everyone's highlight reel is on display 24 hours a day. Comparison is one of the most common sources of insecurity. People compare their progress, appearance, relationships, and achievements to others, often without considering context. But comparison is misleading because it focuses only on external outcomes while ignoring internal journeys. Two people may appear similar on the surface, but their starting points, challenges, and priorities may be completely different. High-value individuals understand that their only real competition is who they were yesterday. They measure growth internally, not externally. This removes unnecessary pressure and creates sustainable motivation. When you stop comparing yourself to others, you begin to focus more on your own progress. You start building momentum based on personal growth rather than social ranking, and that momentum becomes something no one can take away from you. Another important shift is learning to create meaning from within, rather than seeking it from external approval. Many people rely on achievements, recognition, or social feedback to feel valuable, but this creates dependency on outcomes that are uncertain and unpredictable. Instead, high-value living focuses on process, the effort you put in, the discipline you maintain, the integrity you uphold, the consistency you demonstrate. These become sources of fulfillment in themselves. When your sense of meaning comes from your actions rather than external reactions, your confidence becomes stable regardless of what happens around you. Building a life without validation also requires emotional independence. Emotional independence means your sense of self is not easily shaken by opinions, rejection, or silence from others. You can listen to feedback without losing identity. You can experience disagreement without feeling threatened. You can move forward without needing everyone to understand your choices. This does not make you detached from people. It makes you grounded within yourself. And from that grounded place, your relationships actually become healthier because you are showing up from wholeness, not from need. Another important element is learning to accept that not everyone will understand your path. When you stop living for validation, you may notice that some people do not relate to your decisions anymore. They may question your choices or misunderstand your direction. This is natural. When you change your internal standards, not everyone around you will automatically align with them, and that is okay. High-value individuals do not require universal understanding. They require personal alignment. They are comfortable being misunderstood if it means staying true to themselves. As you build a life without validation, your focus shifts from image to substance. Instead of asking how things look, you begin asking how they feel internally and how they contribute to long-term growth. Instead of chasing approval, you begin building capability. Instead of performing for attention, you begin creating genuine value. This shift transforms your identity over time. You become less reactive and more intentional, less dependent and more self-directed, less focused on approval and more focused on purpose. Eventually, something subtle but powerful happens. People begin to notice you differently, not because you are trying to stand out, but because you are no longer trying to fit in. There is a quiet confidence in your presence that does not require explanation. That confidence comes from alignment. When your life is no longer built for validation, you stop living as a reflection of other people's expectations. You start living as an expression of your own values, and in that space, you begin to experience a deeper form of stability, clarity, and self-respect. Because high-value people do not build lives that need approval to feel real. They build lives that feel real because they are aligned. Chapter 10. Create scarcity around your energy. Energy is one of the most underestimated forms of personal power. Most people never think about it this way, but your energy might be the most valuable thing you own. People often think value is only about money, status, or achievements, but in reality, your energy determines how those things come to you and how others respond to you. The way you distribute your attention, your presence, and your availability shapes how the world perceives your value. And here's a principle that applies to almost everything in life. When something is freely available at all times, it becomes easy to overlook. But when something is limited, intentional, and selectively given, it becomes more desirable. This is not just a material principle, it is a deeply psychological one. Scarcity increases perceived value, and this applies directly to human energy. High-value individuals understand this deeply. They do not give unlimited access to everyone. They do not allow their attention to be consumed without purpose. They do not make themselves emotionally or socially available to every situation, request, or person. Instead, they choose where their energy goes with precision. Now, I want to be very honest with you here. Creating scarcity around your energy does not mean becoming cold or disconnected. It means becoming intentional. It means recognizing that your presence is not something to be given away casually. It is something that should be invested where it creates growth, meaning, or mutual respect. Most people live in a state of constant availability. They respond instantly to every message. They say yes to every invitation. They make themselves accessible at all times, even when it drains them completely. Over time, this creates a pattern where their energy is taken for granted. When you are always available, your presence loses weight. It just does. High-value people break this pattern by introducing space into their availability. They do not respond out of impulse. They do not engage with every distraction. They do not allow themselves to be pulled in every direction. Instead, they respond based on priority, not pressure. This creates something interesting. A sense of mystery and respect begins to form around them. People begin to notice that their attention is not guaranteed. It must be earned through alignment and mutual value. One of the key aspects of creating scarcity is learning to say no without guilt. And I know we have touched on this before, but it is worth repeating because so many people struggle with it. Many people overextend themselves because they fear disappointing others. They believe that constant availability makes them kind or likable. But in reality, overextension often leads to burnout, resentment, and reduced respect. Saying no is not rejection of people. It is protection of energy. When you say no to things that do not align with your priorities, you are saying yes to your growth, your peace, and your purpose. High-value individuals understand this trade-off clearly. They do not distribute their energy equally across everything. They invest it where it matters most. Another important part of energy scarcity is emotional selectivity. Not every situation deserves your emotional investment. Not every conflict requires your participation. Not every opinion requires your reaction. When you emotionally respond to everything, your energy becomes fragmented. But when you choose what deserves your emotional engagement, you preserve your strength. This selectivity creates stability. People begin to perceive you as grounded because you are not easily pulled into chaos or unnecessary drama. Scarcity of energy also involves protecting your mental space. What you allow into your thoughts directly influences your emotional state. Constant exposure to negativity, distraction, or irrelevant information weakens clarity. High-value individuals are careful about what they consume mentally because they understand that attention shapes identity. Another important aspect is pacing your presence in relationships and interactions. When you are too accessible, you become predictable. When you are slightly selective, your presence becomes more meaningful. And I want to emphasize this. This does not mean playing games or manipulating others. It means respecting your own time and ensuring that your engagement is intentional rather than automatic. People value what they feel is not easily replaceable. When your energy is scattered across too many places, it loses distinctiveness. But when it is focused and directed, it becomes more impactful. Over time, this creates a shift in how others treat you. They begin to value your time more. They become more thoughtful in how they approach you. They recognize that your attention is not something to be taken lightly. However, the most important transformation is internal. When you create scarcity around your energy, you begin to respect yourself more. You stop giving yourself away in situations that do not deserve your presence. You stop overcommitting. You stop draining yourself for validation or obligation. This leads to a stronger sense of identity. High-value individuals do not chase constant engagement. They understand that their energy is not meant to be distributed endlessly. It is meant to be directed with purpose. There is also a deeper psychological shift that happens when you practice energy scarcity. You move from reactive living to intentional living. Instead of responding to everything that demands your attention, you choose what aligns with your direction. This creates clarity. And as we have talked about, clarity is one of the strongest forms of personal power. When your energy is scarce, it becomes meaningful. When it is meaningful, it becomes respected. And when it is respected, it becomes influential. The goal is not to withdraw from the world. The goal is to engage with it selectively and purposefully, to be present where it matters and absent where it does not. To invest your energy in growth, connection, and purpose, rather than distraction or obligation. Because at the highest level, value is not just about what you do. It is about what you choose not to waste yourself on. Chapter 11. Surround yourself with higher standards. Here is one of the most overlooked truths about personal growth. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Your environment silently shapes your identity. The people you spend time with, the conversations you engage in, and the standards you observe around you all influence what you consider normal. Over time, you begin to reflect the environment you stay in, even without realizing it. It happens slowly, quietly, and almost invisibly. But it happens. High-value individuals understand that growth is not only an internal process. It is also an environmental decision. If you surround yourself with low standards, your expectations will slowly adjust downward. If you surround yourself with high standards, your mindset begins to expand upward. It is almost automatic. Most people do not choose their environment consciously. They fall into it. They stay in relationships out of comfort. They remain in social circles out of habit. They tolerate conversations and behaviors that no longer align with their goals. Over time, this shapes their identity more than their intentions ever could. And here's the part that really matters. You cannot consistently live above the level of your environment. Eventually, it pulls you back to its average. This is not a weakness. It is human nature, which is exactly why your environment matters so much. This is why high-value individuals are intentional about who they allow into their close circle. They understand that proximity is powerful. The closer someone is to you, the more influence they have over your thinking, habits, and decisions. Even subtle behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs are absorbed over time. If you are surrounded by people who complain constantly, you begin to normalize negativity. If you are surrounded by people who lack ambition, your drive slowly weakens. If you are surrounded by people who avoid responsibility, accountability begins to feel optional. On the other hand, when you surround yourself with disciplined, focused, and growth-oriented individuals, your mindset naturally begins to rise. You begin to see higher standards as normal. You begin to expect more from yourself. You begin to adopt habits that reflect the environment you are in. And I want to be clear, this is not about judgment. It is about awareness. Not everyone in your life is meant to grow with you forever. Some people are part of your past. Some are part of your present. And only a few are meant to be part of your future. High-value individuals learn to recognize this without resentment. They understand that growth sometimes requires distance, and that distance does not have to mean hostility. One of the most difficult but necessary parts of raising your standards is outgrowing environments that once felt comfortable. And I know how hard this can be, because familiarity creates emotional attachment, even when something is no longer beneficial. This is why many people stay in situations that limit them. It feels easier than change. But comfort is not the same as growth. They are two very different things. When you choose to raise your standards, you may begin to notice resistance from your environment. Some people may not understand your direction. Others may question your changes. Some may even try to pull you back into old patterns. This is a natural response when you begin to evolve beyond what people are used to. High-value individuals do not interpret this resistance as a reason to stop growing. They understand it as confirmation that change is happening, and they keep moving forward anyway. Another important aspect of surrounding yourself with higher standards is exposure. You do not become high value in isolation. You become high value through exposure to higher levels of thinking, behavior, and achievement. When you see what is possible, your perception of what is acceptable shifts. This exposure can come from mentors, books, environments, communities, or even observing people who operate at a higher level. The key is to consistently place yourself in situations where better standards are visible. When you are exposed to higher standards regularly, your internal benchmark begins to rise. What once felt acceptable starts to feel average. What once felt impressive starts to feel normal. This shift is essential for long-term growth. High-value individuals actively seek environments that challenge them. They do not avoid discomfort that leads to improvement. They place themselves in situations where they are encouraged to grow, adapt, and refine themselves. This requires humility, because When you enter higher standard environments, you are often not the most experienced, the most skilled, or the most knowledgeable person in the room. But this is exactly where growth happens. Ego resists this position. Growth embraces it. Another important part of this process is reducing exposure to environments that reinforce low standards. This does not always mean cutting people off completely. It means setting boundaries around your exposure and influence. It means being selective about where your energy is invested. Not every relationship deserves equal access to your time and attention. High-value individuals understand this distinction clearly. They do not allow convenience to override growth. As your environment improves, your behavior naturally begins to change. You become more disciplined without forcing it. You become more focused because distraction is no longer the norm around you. You become more intentional because you are constantly influenced by people and spaces that reflect higher standards. Over time, your identity begins to shift. You no longer need to force yourself to think differently. Your environment reinforces it daily. This is why environment is one of the most powerful tools for transformation. It shapes expectations, which shape behavior, which shape identity. Surrounding yourself with higher standards is not about comparison or superiority. It is about alignment. It is about placing yourself in spaces that challenge you to become better, rather than keep you comfortable at a lower level. High-value people understand this deeply. They do not wait for change to happen internally before changing their environment. They change their environment to support the identity they are building. Because ultimately, you become a reflection of what you consistently allow around you. And when you choose to surround yourself with higher standards, you give yourself no choice but to rise to meet them. Chapter 12. Become excellent at something. Let me share something with you that might simplify your entire approach to building value. One of the fastest ways to increase your perceived worth in life is to become genuinely excellent at something. Not average, not casual, not inconsistent, but truly skilled, disciplined, and reliable in a specific area that creates value for others and for yourself. Excellence changes how people see you, but more importantly, it changes how you see yourself. Many people underestimate the power of competence. They focus on appearance, confidence tricks, or social approval, thinking these will create lasting respect. But here is what I have learned, and I believe it with everything in me. Confidence without competence is fragile. It collapses under pressure. Real confidence is built on ability. When you know you can deliver results, your presence naturally becomes stronger, calmer, and more grounded. High-value individuals understand that skill is a form of power. The more capable you become, the less you need to seek validation. You no longer rely on opinions to feel worthy because your results speak for themselves. Competence reduces insecurity because it replaces uncertainty with evidence. Most people remain average not because they lack potential, but because they lack focus. They try to improve in too many directions at once. They chase multiple interests without committing deeply to any of them. As a result, they never build mastery. And without mastery, their value remains diluted. Excellence requires concentration. It requires choosing a direction and staying with it long enough to become exceptional. This means resisting the urge to constantly switch paths when progress feels slow. And I know that is hard. especially in a world that constantly tells you to try the next thing, follow the next trend, chase the next opportunity. But real skill development is not instant. It is built through repetition, correction, and persistence over time. High-value people are willing to stay in the learning phase longer than most. They understand that confidence is not about quick wins. It is about long-term refinement. They are willing to look imperfect in the beginning if it leads to strength in the future. There is a direct connection between skill and confidence. And I want you to really understand this. When you lack skill, you depend on external validation to feel secure. When you develop skill, confidence becomes internal. You know what you are capable of, and that knowledge stabilizes your mindset even in uncertain situations. This is why becoming excellent at something is not just a career strategy. It is a personal transformation strategy. It changes your identity from someone who hopes to be valuable into someone who knows they are valuable because they can produce results. Excellence also creates independence. When you have a skill that others need or respect, you become less dependent on approval or acceptance. You are no longer trying to prove your worth through words. Your actions carry weight. Your output carries influence. Your presence carries authority. In a world where many people are competing for attention, competence quietly separates you from the noise. While others are trying to be noticed, you become useful. And usefulness is far more powerful than attention. High-value individuals do not chase attention as their primary goal. They focus on becoming so skilled that attention naturally follows. They understand that value is not claimed, it is demonstrated, and demonstration comes from results, not intentions. Another important aspect of excellence is discipline. And I want to speak to you warmly about this because discipline is not always glamorous. Skill development requires consistency even when motivation is low. There will be days when progress feels slow or invisible. There will be moments of frustration, doubt, and fatigue. But those who become excellent are not the ones who never struggle. They are the ones who continue despite struggle. Discipline transforms effort into mastery. Without discipline, talent remains unused. With discipline, even average starting points can evolve into extraordinary outcomes. High-value people also embrace feedback. They do not interpret correction as criticism of their worth. They see it as refinement of their skill. This mindset allows them to grow faster because they are not emotionally attached to being perfect. They are committed to being better. Over time, excellence creates reputation. People begin to associate your name with reliability, quality, and competence. This reputation becomes valuable in itself. You do not need to constantly promote yourself because your work speaks consistently. This is one of the hidden advantages of mastery. It reduces the need for self-promotion. It replaces explanation with evidence. And in a world full of noise, evidence is everything. Becoming excellent at something also reshapes your internal dialogue. Instead of asking whether you are good enough, you begin asking how you can improve further. Your focus shifts from insecurity to refinement. This creates a mindset of continuous growth rather than constant doubt. It is important to understand that excellence does not require perfection. It requires commitment. It requires showing up repeatedly, improving incrementally, and refusing to stay stagnant. Even small improvements, when sustained over time, creates significant transformation. High-value individuals are not defined by natural talent alone. They are defined by persistence in developing their abilities. They understand that mastery is built, not gifted. As you become more skilled, something subtle begins to happen. You stop needing to convince others of your value. You stop chasing validation. You stop questioning your worth as often. Instead, your focus shifts to contribution, improvement, and impact. This is the natural outcome of competence. When you become excellent at something, you no longer have to ask the world for recognition. The world begins to respond to your ability. And in that response, you discover a quieter, more stable form of confidence. One that does not depend on applause, approval, or attention. Because high-value people are not defined by what they say they can do. They are defined by what they consistently prove they can do. Chapter 13. Walk away from what doesn't value you. This chapter might be the hardest one to hear, but it might also be the one that sets you free. One of the clearest signs of personal growth is the ability to walk away from what no longer values you. Not out of anger, not out of ego, not out of impulsive emotion, but out of self-respect and clarity. High-value individuals understand that staying in the wrong place, relationship, or environment often costs more than leaving ever will, and yet, most people struggle with walking away. They struggle because they confuse attachment with loyalty. They hold on to situations long after they have stopped serving their growth. They tolerate disrespect because they remember better moments from the past. They stay in places where they are undervalued because they fear uncertainty more than stagnation. And I understand that. I really do. Walking away from something familiar, even when it hurts you, is one of the most difficult things a person can do. But over time, staying where you are not valued creates a slow erosion of self-worth that is even more painful. When you remain where you are not valued, you begin to adapt downward. You start adjusting your expectations. You accept less attention, less respect, less effort from others. Not because it feels right, but because it feels familiar. This is how people gradually lose their sense of standards without even noticing it. High-value people break this pattern by recognizing a simple truth. Value must be mutual. If your presence, effort, or energy is not appreciated, it is not aligned. And if it is not aligned, it is not meant to be forced. Walking away is not about punishment. It is about alignment. It is about choosing environments, relationships, and opportunities that reflect your worth rather than diminish it. It is about refusing to invest where there is no return on respect, growth, or mutual value. Many people stay because they hope things will change. They believe that if they try harder, explain better, or give more, the situation will improve. And I want to speak gently here, because that hope comes from a beautiful place inside you. But value does not increase through one-sided effort. When only one person is investing, imbalance grows, not balance. High-value individuals understand when effort is being misused. They recognize when their presence is taken for granted. They notice when their time and energy are not met with equal intention. And instead of overextending themselves, they step back. Walking away requires emotional strength because it often involves letting go of familiarity. Even when something is not good for you, it can still feel comfortable because it is known. The unknown feels uncertain, and the mind often prefers predictable discomfort over unpredictable possibility. But growth does not exist inside comfort zones that no longer serve you. It never has, and it never will. One of the most powerful realizations in personal development is that your value increases when you stop accepting what reduces it. When you walk away from situations that do not respect you, you send a clear message to yourself and to others. Your standards are not negotiable. This shift changes everything. It influences how people treat you in future interactions. It changes how you make decisions. It changes how you interpret behavior. You stop rationalizing disrespect. You stop excusing inconsistency. You stop confusing attention with value. High-value individuals do not wait until they are completely drained to leave. They observe patterns. They assess alignment. They make decisions based on consistency, not occasional good moments, because they understand that long-term patterns reveal truth more accurately than short-term behavior ever could. Walking away also strengthens identity. Every time you choose yourself over low-value situations, you reinforce self-respect. You train your mind to prioritize your well-being. You build internal confidence that does not rely on external validation. And I want to remind you of something important. This is not about becoming emotionally detached or isolated. It is about becoming selective. It is about recognizing that your time, energy, and presence are limited resources, and they should not be spent where they are not valued. There is a misconception that leaving means loss, but in reality, staying in the wrong place is the real loss. It costs your confidence, your energy, your focus, and sometimes even your identity. Walking away preserves what is valuable within you. High-value people understand that not every connection is meant to last. Not every opportunity is meant to be accepted. Not every situation is meant to be fixed. Some things are simply not aligned, and forcing alignment often leads to frustration rather than growth. When you develop the ability to walk away, you also develop emotional independence. You stop relying on external validation for your sense of worth. You become comfortable with the idea that not everything and not everyone is meant to stay in your life. This creates peace because you are no longer trying to hold on to what is already leaving. Another important aspect is timing. Walking away is most powerful when done with clarity rather than emotional reaction. It is not about impulsively leaving during conflict, but about recognizing consistent patterns that show lack of respect or value. This clarity ensures that your decisions are grounded, not reactive. Over time, this habit transforms how others perceive you. People begin to understand that your presence is intentional, not guaranteed. They recognize that access to you requires respect, consistency, and alignment. This naturally increases your perceived value, but the most important transformation is internal. You stop abandoning yourself for the sake of staying in situations that do not align with who you are becoming. You begin to trust your judgment more. You begin to respect your boundaries more. You begin to prioritize your growth over your fear of loss. Walking away is not an act of rejection. It is an act of self-respect. It is the understanding that your life is too valuable to be spent where it is not appreciated. And in that understanding, you step into a higher version of yourself, one that no longer begs for value, but quietly chooses where it belongs. Chapter 14. Become the prize. We have come a long way together through this journey, and now we arrive at what might be the most transformative chapter of all. Most people live their lives chasing validation, attention, and approval from others. They position themselves as seekers, constantly trying to be chosen, accepted, or noticed. They wait for someone to see their value. They hope for someone to recognize their worth. They exhaust themselves trying to prove that they are enough. But high-value individuals operate from an entirely different mindset. They do not chase. They become the prize. And before you misunderstand this, becoming the prize is not about arrogance or superiority. Not even a little bit. It is about internal development, self-respect, and alignment. It is the shift from needing to be chosen to becoming someone who naturally attracts respect, attention, and opportunities, without forcing any of them. When you become the prize, your entire mindset changes. You stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Is this aligned with who I am becoming?" That single shift removes desperation from your behavior. It changes the way you speak, the way you move, and the way you interact with the world around you. High-value individuals understand that attraction is not created through pursuit. It is created through value. People are drawn to those who are grounded, confident, and purposeful, not those who are constantly trying to prove themselves. Becoming the prize starts with self-perception. And this is where everything begins, right here, inside your own mind. If you see yourself as someone who needs approval, your behavior will reflect that insecurity. You may over-explain. You may overgive. You may overextend yourself just to be accepted. But when you see yourself as genuinely valuable, your behavior naturally becomes more selective and intentional. You stop trying to impress everyone because you understand that not everyone deserves access to you. One of the most important aspects of becoming the prize is emotional independence. Your mood is no longer controlled by how others respond to you. You do not feel elevated by praise or destroyed by rejection. Instead, you remain grounded in your own sense of worth. This emotional stability is powerful because it creates consistency in your presence. People begin to feel that you are not easily influenced, not easily shaken, and not easily available. And this naturally increases respect, not because you demanded it, but because your steadiness communicates it without words. Another key element is scarcity. And I do not mean manufactured scarcity, not games, not tricks, not pretending to be busy. I mean natural scarcity that comes from having genuine direction in your life. When you are focused on your goals, your growth, and your purpose, your time becomes naturally limited. You are not always available, not always accessible, not always waiting for external interaction. This does not push people away. It elevates your presence because when something is not overly available, it becomes more meaningful when it is given. High-value individuals do not center their lives around other people's attention. They build lives that are already full, purposeful, and directed. Relationships, opportunities, and interactions become additions to their life, not the foundation of it. This is what makes them the prize. Another important aspect of becoming the prize is self-respect. You simply cannot become the prize if you abandon yourself for approval. Every time you ignore your boundaries, tolerate disrespect, or chase validation, you lower your perceived value to yourself and to others. Self-respect creates structure. It defines what you will and will not accept. It determines how you allow others to treat you. It becomes the invisible standard that shapes every interaction. When people sense that you respect yourself, they begin to adjust how they treat you, not because you demanded it, but because your behavior makes it unmistakably clear. Becoming the prize also requires continuous focus on self-improvement. You do not become valuable by declaring it. You become valuable by building it. Skills, discipline, mindset, health, emotional intelligence, purpose. All of these contribute to your overall value. The more you invest in yourself, the less you need validation from others, because your progress becomes visible proof of your worth. High-value individuals do not wait to be chosen. They become so aligned with their growth and purpose that selection becomes secondary. They are not competing for attention. They are creating value. This shift changes everything about how they move through life. In relationships, they do not chase emotional availability. They offer clarity and presence, but they do not overextend themselves for inconsistent behavior. In opportunities, they do not beg for chances. They build competence until opportunities naturally align with them. In social environments, they do not seek approval. They contribute value and move with quiet confidence. Becoming the prize is also about patience. And I think this is where many people struggle. When you are no longer desperate for immediate validation, you allow time to work in your favor. You understand that real value develops over time, not through urgency or pressure. This patience creates emotional control. It removes anxiety from outcomes. It allows you to stay consistent even when results are not immediate. And that consistency is what separates high-value people from everyone else. Most importantly, becoming the prize is about identity. It is not a temporary mindset you put on like a mask. It is a way of living. You no longer operate from insecurity or neediness. You operate from clarity and self-worth. You stop asking for permission to exist at a high level. You start embodying it, naturally, quietly, and consistently. And when that happens, something subtle but powerful shifts. People no longer see you as someone trying to be valuable. They see you as someone who already is, not because you announced it, but because your behavior, your boundaries, your focus, and your presence make it undeniable. This is the final stage of becoming expensive, not chasing attention, not seeking validation, not proving worth, but becoming the prize so completely that attention becomes a natural response, not a pursued goal. Conclusion: live like you know your worth. We have traveled a long road together, and if you have stayed with me this far, I want you to know that says something about you. It says you are someone who cares about growth, someone who is ready to stop settling, someone who is no longer willing to live below their value, and that matters more than you might realize right now. Throughout this entire journey, one central truth has remained consistent. Your value is not something you chase, prove, or beg for. It is something you build, embody, and protect. Every single chapter we have walked through together has pointed back to this same foundation. The idea of being expensive was never about money, status, or external appearance. It has always been about self-worth, discipline, and the quiet power of knowing who you are, without needing constant validation from the world around you. Most people spend their lives searching outside themselves for confirmation that they matter. They look for it in relationships, in achievements, in attention, in approval, in comparison. But the more they search externally, the more unstable their sense of identity becomes, because anything that depends on external validation will always be fragile. It will rise and fall based on opinions, circumstances, and reactions that are never fully in your control. The purpose of this journey has been to shift that direction inward, to help you understand that real power begins when you stop outsourcing your worth, when you stop chasing attention and start building substance, when you stop adjusting yourself to be accepted and start aligning yourself with who you actually want to become. Being expensive is not about acting superior or distancing yourself from people. It is about clarity. Clarity about your values. Clarity about your standards. Clarity about what you will accept and what you will no longer tolerate. It is the quiet understanding that your time, energy, focus, and emotional presence are not unlimited resources to be given away without intention. When you begin to live with this awareness, your behavior naturally changes. You speak with more intention. You move with more patience. You choose your environments more carefully. You stop reacting impulsively to every situation and start responding from a place of stability. You become less available to chaos and more available to growth. And I want to be honest with you. This is not an overnight transformation. It never is. It is a process of repetition and refinement. You will not master self-worth in a single decision. You will master it in the small moments, the moments that nobody else sees. When you set a boundary instead of staying silent, when you walk away instead of over-explaining, when you invest in your growth instead of seeking distraction, when you say no without guilt and yes with purpose. Each of these moments builds identity. Each decision reinforces who you are becoming. And over time, these decisions compound into a completely different version of you, a version that is no longer dependent on external validation to feel secure, a version that does not chase attention because it is already grounded in self-respect, a version that understands value is demonstrated, not demanded. There will always be environments and people who test this growth. Situations where it feels easier to return to old patterns of approval-seeking, overgiving, or self-abandonment. But awareness changes your response. Once you see these patterns clearly, you cannot unknowingly return to them in the same way. You begin to notice when you are lowering your standards. You begin to recognize when you are giving away your energy too cheaply. And in that recognition, you regain control. That awareness is your greatest tool, and no one can take it from you. Living like you know your worth does not mean you stop caring about people. It means you stop over-sacrificing. It means you stop confusing validation with love. It means you stop mistaking attention for value. It means you begin choosing yourself without guilt, while still respecting others without losing yourself in the process. And I think that balance is one of the most beautiful things a person can achieve. Caring deeply about others while caring deeply about yourself at the same time. That is not selfishness. That is wholeness. True high value is not loud. It does not need to announce itself. It does not depend on external recognition to exist. It is calm, stable, and consistent. It shows up in how you carry yourself when no one is watching. It is reflected in your boundaries, your discipline, your focus, and your emotional control. It is revealed in what you refuse to tolerate just as much as in what you choose to pursue. As you move forward from here, the goal is not perfection. Please hear me on that. Perfection was never the goal. The goal is alignment. There will be moments of doubt, moments of weakness, moments where old habits try to resurface. That is part of the process, and it does not mean you have failed. What matters is not never falling back, but consistently choosing to rise back into awareness. Each time you do, your foundation becomes stronger. Each time you choose yourself, your identity becomes clearer. Each time you honor your standards, your confidence becomes more stable. At a deeper level, being expensive is about self-respect that does not fluctuate based on who is watching or who is approving. It is about becoming someone who does not need to be constantly reminded of their worth, because they live in alignment with it every single day. You stop negotiating your value in every interaction. You stop proving yourself in every situation. You start operating from the understanding that your worth is already established through how you live, not how others respond. If there is one final thought I want to leave you with, one thing I hope stays with you long after this journey ends, it is this. The world does not define your value. It reflects it. When you respect yourself, the world responds differently. When you raise your standards, your environment adjusts. When you become disciplined, focused, and self-aware, your life begins to mirror that transformation. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. So move forward with clarity. Protect your energy. Invest in your growth. Walk away from what diminishes you. Speak with intention. Act with purpose. Surround yourself with people and environments that challenge you to rise, and above all, never return to a version of yourself that forgot your worth. That version served its purpose. It taught you lessons. It showed you what you do not want. But it is not who you are anymore. Because once you truly understand that you are the prize, you no longer live to be chosen. You no longer wait for permission to matter. You no longer search for someone to tell you that you are enough. You already know. Your value is already real, already present, and already waiting for you to live like it. So go. Live like you know your worth, because you do.